Hello, OTC students. What's going on? My name is Jordan Bludorn, and I'm here today to talk to you about how to attack programming problems. A little bit about myself. I used to be an OTC student. I graduated last May, I believe, and I now work building medical administrative software for hospitals. Um, Most of my coding is done in JavaScript and PHP, so forgive me a little bit if my Python isn't quite up to speed, but I'll try and make it through. Um, what I'm trying to focus on today is how do we attack programming problems when we're presented with difficult tasks. A lot of times when someone tells you what you're going to be doing, what they want you to do, it's going to sound extremely overwhelming. Uh, you're going to hear all kinds of things and you're going to go, I have no idea how to do that at all, but that's fine. The way you're going to want to really go at these kinds of problems is not going straight at it and trying to solve the hardest thing first. Really, you're going to want to break any assignment or any kind of work that you get doing programming into the simplest tasks so that way you can kind of build yourself up. All right, so the project that we're going to work on today is we're going to take a user string. We're going to want to capitalize every second letter in this and then re-output it to the user. So the first thing I like to do when I get to these is just break it down into what are all the steps that I need to do to make this go from start to finish. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get the user input. We're going to then need to manipulate the input, which is going to entail capitalizing every second letter. And then finally, we're going to want to output the final product to the user. Oh my god, I can't type today. All right. So this is kind of daunting because when you first think about it, you go, I don't know how to capitalize every second letter. That's not an intuitive thing. But if we look at our steps, there are some that we know how to do right away. We know how to output and we know how to get input. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do the simplest steps first. The things we know how to do, we'll start there, and then we can move on later to the hard parts. So the one that jumps out to me that's the simplest, easiest to do is we know how to output. So we're going to just start with that. So we'll make a variable that we'll inevitably use that we'll just call it user word. And in this case, it's just going to say foo. And we're just going to print that out back to the user. Nothing special, very basic hello world style at that point. Now we're going to test it to make sure that works. It's very important to constantly be debugging as you go, so when you make changes, you know that that's what caused whatever just happened. If you try and build the whole thing and then run it, if it crashes right away, you have all kinds of changes you've made and you have no idea which one is the one that's causing the big issue. So constant debugging is important. So we'll go ahead and run this with our capitalizer. All right. And you can see it just outputs the word foo. That's all we needed out of it. Perfect. Now, the other step that we realize, hey, I can do that, is we know how to get user input. We've done that plenty of times. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to go raw input, and we'll just say enter a word here. And now we're going to go ahead and test that, because now we've done something else that'll change our program. So go ahead and run it. Enter a word. I'll go ahead and type foo. Awesome. Now we've got 2/3 of our program already figured out. 2 of the 3 major steps that we've decided on are now ready to go. So now we just need to figure out, all right, how do I manipulate the input the way I wanted it to? But you can see we've already done most of the work here. So now we kind of need to sit here and brainstorm a little bit and think, how would I go about doing this? I know that I want to have every other letter be capitalized, and I want every first letter or so to be lowercase. So what that starts kind of clicking in my head right away is, oh, I'm probably going to need to loop through all of those letters and do something to each letter individually. So what I'm going to start doing right when I figure that out is I'm going to build a for loop because I know I'm going to loop through that. In this case, I know enough about Python to say, there is a way for me to just loop directly over each letter. So I can say for every character C in our user word, we're going to do something. I haven't quite figured out what I want to do yet. I just know that that's going to be the first step. If that doesn't click to you right away, you can always go online to places like Stack Overflow, where there's plenty of people there that can put you on the right path and tell you, oh, you are trying to go through each letter. This is how you do that. Use resources on the internet to help you with things like that. They're very useful for that kind of help. So now that I've figured out I can loop over each letter, I know that every first letter I want to be lowercase and I want every second letter to be uppercase. So that means I'm going to need some way to track what position I'm currently looking at. So all I'm going to do then is think, well, I can just use a variable to do that. So I'll say current index, and we're going to start at the very first, we're going to start at 0. Which, therefore, then I'm going to need to make sure that every time I loop through it, I'm going to need to make that index go 1 higher. So right now, I'm just going to say, every time we're done with the loop, go ahead and say the current index equals 1 more than it's currently at. All right, so now we have some way to track where we're at in the word. We're going through the word 1 letter at a time. Now we need to figure out the logic that goes with that. So I know that I can use an if statement here, and I can check the current index and say, if I'm currently on an even number, then I need that to be capitalized. Or if I'm on an odd number, I need it to be lowercase. So I'm going to use an if statement here. I'm going to say, I know it has to do with the current index, and I know a property of an even number is that if you divide it by 2, there's going to be no remainder. That's where we get to use the fun little modulus, which all that's saying is I want you to divide my first number by my second number, which in this case will be 2, and the result that I'm going to get is the remainder. So if I divide 4 by 2, there's going to be no remainder. So that means that if my current index divided by 2, mod 2 is 0, then I must be on an even number. So in that case, I can say C dot lower. So now I know that that's how I'm going to make a letter lowercase, but that's going to return a lowercase. It won't explicitly make that letter there in my word. Let me rephrase that. It won't make the letter in my word into a lowercase. It just will return a lowercase version of that letter. So what that means to me is I'm going to need another variable here, which is going to be my modified word. So we're going to go ahead and make that. And the modified word, we're just going to set to an empty string. So now what I can do here is, now that I have it empty, I can say, go ahead and add that lowercase letter, the one that I'm returning as a lowercase letter, to my modified word. Now, for every even letter, it's going to bring in a lowercase version of that letter and add it to my modified word. Now all we have to do is say, all right, if it's not an even one, I want you to go ahead and give me an uppercase letter. So now it's going to switch on each one if it's, oh, there's a syntax error here. Sorry about that. So we're going to say, if it's an even letter, go ahead and make it lowercase, and if it's odd, go ahead and make it uppercase. And then add it to my modified word, which will start off empty, but we'll add it through. And then finally, just go ahead and update the current index. After we've gotten through that, instead of giving our user word back, we want to now use the modified word. So now you can see we've broken the whole project into our 3 steps. We have get user input right here. We have manipulate the input. We can even break it out. And then we have the final output right here. So we've taken this difficult project. Let's make sure it works now that we can debug it and now that we think we have our solution. Go ahead and run it. So let's put in our word now is going to be banana again, because that's a fun word. And it didn't give us what we were looking for. That's good, because now we can kind of sit there and think, what happened? Let's go through and figure out where this project has gone wrong. That's why we do our debugging. But we know now that it's not a problem with the input, and it's not a problem with the output. It's going to be somewhere in this mid section right here. Pause video. So let's go ahead and kind of step through and think about each iteration of our loop. Where might that have gone wrong? All right, so we've entered a word is our first step. So we have banana is now in there. We'll go through, these are set, that's fine. So now we're going to loop through it. So for the first letter, which is B, we're going to say if current index divided by 2, if the remainder of that is 0, which in this case it will be, because 0 divided by anything is still 0. We're going to say modified word plus equals. See, right there. We found the issue right away just by stepping through and kind of thinking about what's happening in each step. The problem here is that we made the modified word equal to what we got instead of adding the letter in, which is what we were meant to do in the first place. So you can kind of see, oh yeah, I made a mistake, but because I parted this out, I can see exactly where that mistake was. I don't have to try and figure out the entire program. I can just figure out this one part. So let's go ahead and try it again. So we'll go ahead and put it in. And you can see now, oh, it was that mistake right there. When you break it into smaller parts, it becomes a lot easier to solve these complex problems. And then we can find where the mistake was. And you can use this throughout your entire programming, and you will use it throughout your entire programming career. Every day my boss hands me brand new projects that sound impossible and I have no idea what I'm going to do, but all I do is I take a breath and I break it into smaller parts and then finally come up with a fully working solution by going one step at a time. Don't try to solve it all at once. Solve it one step at a time and focus on the steps you know how to do. All right, I hope that's helpful. I think you guys can use that. It'll be very useful for all of your future assignments. It'll be very useful for your future projects when you're working. Good luck and have a great one, guys. All right.